Hello, my friend. This is Clyde. I am going to help. Our reading comes from Romans 1 and verse 16, which says, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes." The history of slavery in the United States could never be told without talking about Harriet Tubman, the abolitionist, the activist, the 19th century Moses, as she was called. Harriet was born a slave in 1822 in Maryland. As a slave, she saw it all. She experienced the horrors of slavery until her escape in 1849. Freedom is sweet. Freedom is priceless. Freedom demands something from the one who is free, and Miss Tubman got that message. This Christian woman plunged herself into a sophisticated and dangerous effort to help other slaves to experience what she experienced. She made 13 different missions back to the slave estates, and through this system that was later called the Underground Railroad, Harriet led many slaves, including family and friends, out of slavery into full freedom, some reaching as far as Canada. She was relentless, brave, and determined that as many people as possible should escape the horrors of slavery and enjoy freedom. Harriet was not ashamed of what she was doing, dangerous as it was, because she knew that it was the right thing to do, and she never apologized. Today, more than 100 years after her death, she is honored in numerous ways and continues to inspire others to serve those who are in need. Can we become like her? Paul wrote the verse that is our text today. The gospel of Jesus Christ is liberating. It is the entrance to a life of freedom. It is that sharp tool that breaks the chains that hold us captive in the camp of Satan. It is that bright light that guides a wandering soul lost in the world of sin and pain and defeat to the shores of salvation. The gospel is by no means glamorous. It is not your first option for a life of fun and excitement. But when the gospel comes where you are, it messes you up, because here is what it does. It forces you to take a serious look at what you have become, of what you are doing, of the squalor and dehumanizing circumstances that you are living in, and it offers you a far better life. It offers you hope, it offers you love, it offers you freedom like you've never known, and it keeps its word. When it promises you life, real life, that is exactly what you get the minute you respond to the call of the gospel. Let us take a look at what the gospel comes up against. We were born into slavery, enslaved to the condemnation of being separated from God, or as Psalm 51 verse 5 says, born in sin and shaped in iniquity. We joined a band of people on a train going down the highway of sin. But the truth is that the older you get is the more this train offered you a nice picture. There is freedom to engage in all kinds of activities. Paul lists some of them later in this very chapter: immorality, idolatry, wickedness, greed, depravity, murder, deceit, hate. Elsewhere, he added things like filthy language, impurity, anger, rage, and so much more. The weird thing was that all around you and somehow the people involved seemed to be enjoying all these things. The more you engaged in that world is the more you realized that the pleasure was short-lived, and you constantly had to do more and experience more for the brief stint of pleasure. That was going to be your life until you die. But somehow one day you heard the gospel, the same gospel that Paul talks about in the text. The gospel offered an escape from the only life you had ever known. Somehow you would think that would be an easy decision, but there were things in your world, and people too, who would tell you that the gospel is boring, that it is not what it promises to be. Until one day you made up your mind to jump off that train. Jesus rescued you. He picked you up and turned you around, and Jesus brought you into a brand new life. He healed your heart, he changed your name, he made you whole, and he gave you a promise to live forever. You could hardly believe what you've come into. You feel like it's a dream that you don't want to wake up from, but you realize soon that it is real, that the gospel has set you free. It has changed the course of your life forever. Oh, and do not forget Miss Tubman, and do not forget Paul. Miss Tubman knew the horrors of slavery, and she determined in her heart that she would risk her life to help some others to get out of that life. Think about it. that she could have gone off to Canada and live a peaceful life, quiet, and hope that her family and friends on the slave farm in Maryland would figure it out like she did. She never had to endanger herself to help them. Paul says the gospel is the power of God to salvation. Paul was living what he thought was a good life, but it was a life outside of Jesus, and it was not fulfilling, despite all his accolades and achievements. He was religious, but his religion only provided him with a temporary stint of joy, which soon evaporated. When Paul found the gospel, or when the gospel found him, he decided not to be quiet. My friend, the gospel is compelling. You have tasted the sweetness of the gospel, and surely you don't want to be selfish. Would you be a modern-day Harriet Tubman? Would you make the effort to bring out some more people from the slavery of sin into the freedom that Jesus offers? It could cost you time and effort and maybe more, but how can you not want to help, say, your friends, your family, people who you know? Remember, if you don't help them to get out, they can end up in hell forever. They could die in sin's slavery. Decide today, my friend, to help. Help to even share the gospel with one person and see that person escape the horrors of sin and enter into the freedom that Jesus offers.